All right. It's a little after 3:30 and we have a quorum here, so I am inclined to call this meeting of the Rental Housing Advisory Board to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Christensen? Lord? Christensen?
Here.
Gulen? Hobbs?
Here, sorry.
That's okay. Erickson?
Here.
Ernst?
Here.
And Javaltis?
Here.
And I think that's everybody then.
All right, thank you. All right, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we have a few guests here too, so I'll just so everybody knows, Kelly Nyforth, Community Development Director. I don't know if John Zarati or Casey will be attending this meeting. I just reached out to them from a city standpoint. And then I believe we have another guest with us too, Michael Rust from the Winnebago County Conflict Resolution Center, which we will be talking about in a couple items down. And then Lou Shear from AVOCAP is joining us again.
All right, thank you and welcome all. It doesn't look like there are any citizens here to speak, so move on to item 4 of the agenda, approval of the minutes from the October 13th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval for October 13th minutes.
I'll second. It's Linda.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? Very well. We'll take a vote then on passing the minutes from the October meeting as submitted.
You just do a roll call vote, or you just want
Sorry.
to?
Yeah, I think in this format we always do a roll call vote just to make sure that.
No, that's fine. Ernst?
Aye.
Erickson?
Aye.
Hobbs?
Aye.
Valtis?
Aye.
And Hutchinson?
Aye.
Yeah.
So the minutes are approved unanimously. And that can bring us then to item 5 on our agenda, the rental assistance update. And we have Lou Shear from AdvoCap with us, as was stated. And Lou provided everyone with a spreadsheet with some numbers and information on it about rental assistance being provided by AdvoCap, as well as some other programs and things as well. So, Lou, would you care to update us?
Okay, I just want to clarify that everybody understands my madness on this sheet. And let's just use the first line of other housing cost. The first line being, this is what ESI has contributed since the beginning, meaning since February of 21. Then I put AVOCAP down as the WERA numbers. Because the state of Wisconsin's fiscal year ends at the end of September and starts over October, that's why I have it split out into two things. So at this point, the ESI numbers are going to be updated to you regularly, as well as the AVOCAP October through current. And those are the numbers that are going to change. October, February through the September should not, because there's no changes there. So we have, if you look all the way to the bottom, we have provided over $7 million of assistance just under the WERA program. And of that, it appears that about 4,272,000 plus has gone into Winnebago County. And so for the ease of understanding all of it, I just kind of put at the bottom, this is what WERA is per county and the percentages of those amounts and the estimated households. And I remind you of that because I can give you unduplicated numbers for the WERA, I cannot for ESI. So using the national using the average provided by the state of Wisconsin, which is $3,913 per household, we estimate that there have been 1,805 served of of which over 1,000 of them in our Winnebago County. So is this format helpful? Do you understand? Is this what you'd like to see? Because I can continue to provide this so you have kind of an ongoing tally of what's happening on this between the meetings.
Yes, I think your explanation of the layout is pretty clear, and I think it's useful information for us to have, definitely.
Unfortunately, right now, ESI is behind getting people's applications in for energy services, and I would have to tell you, we are approximately 5 weeks behind. We've increased the hours and we've hired new people that should be started before the holidays, and yet there's just a tremendous amount of call. We estimate that we get approximately 36 to 48 calls a day adding to this list, and that's new people that asking for assistance. That's not people just returning phone calls.
This is Tim. Are you finding that most of the applicant, or I guess, or what am I trying to ask here? You've explained in the past that there's been some issues with like college students and things calling in to get assistance when they're not eligible. Are you still seeing ineligible people like applying?
There are still some, but we have remedied the state of Wisconsin made a determination, or the Treasury Department made a determination with college students that are under the age of 25. They're not considered for this program. We would consider them if they were a non-standard, meaning a family, that sort of thing. We're not looking to be ridiculously prohibitive. We're trying to get as many people as possible, but we continue to get a number of calls for people who are renting units, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, because that's what they can rent. The 1 and 2s are hard to come by. That's what we're seeing, or that's what we're hearing. So that's not just in Winnebago County, that is throughout. And landlords, there are some landlords who are still very excited about the opportunity for them to be able to charge whatever they want, because we're not tied to fair market rent, and we pay the utilities, and they're under the impression that they can get through at least 1 year with this tenant and have everything paid, and they're willing to move forward in that direction.
This is Lindsay. I think I ask this every time, but any barriers that you're seeing, or opportunities or gaps that you see, community groups that can help communicate out needs that you're seeing, or what do you need from us that we could provide?
Well, and I know this is going to be a larger community project, in the sense that I'm sure that Day by Day is going to be making a stand on this, and I know Solution Center, and we have had this conversation. It is just, again, that lack of affordable housing. My money is restricted that we can help people with. It is. And so the landlords are able to get more than fair market rent, and they're charging it. And so there still is this gap, and it will be a continual gap for people who are working part-time, but who cannot afford the rents and utilities being separate. I don't know how else to say that. I know we had a meeting in Fond du Lac, which I realize is not Winnebago County, but they have over 100 people that are already looking for shelter that is above the numbers of that the warming shelter can hold. I mean, the amount of people on the street is increasing, and the lack of affordable housing seems to be that point everyone goes to, is saying, I've applied everywhere, I can't get in. I'll be interested, and I plan on holding on to listen to Michael and seeing what he's seeing. But again, it's just the lack of affordable housing. People are getting $1,200 for an apartment, and if I've got a barrier in place, I'm not even getting a chance. So it's tough. It's a tough market, and not going to get easier, I don't think.
So Lou, are you saying that the increased amounts that landlords are charging is because they're being able to get this reimbursement from the WERA funds? Or are you saying they're just charging that amount because that's what they can get?
Well, when they work with us, and I'll say Advocate, they've been, some landlords have been using us and have been working with our homeless program, but we're always saying it has to be at fair market rent, when fair market rent includes utilities. And so they're saying at this point, you have two different programs. I'd rather work with this one. We're also seeing a lot of changes in a lot of property management companies that are setting single standards, which is not uncommon. But with the property management company versus working with a sole proprietor or a mom and pop or and a landlord who is interested in being part of the solution, they have standards that say, no, we're not taking anybody with evictions in the past 2 years, or their income has to be 3 times. It doesn't matter if the income is coming from a different source. They're not interested in that, or if the rent is being paid by a third party. They want the income. And because there are people out there looking for housing, they're able to fill their units. They don't need to work with our programs. So they find they can charge more rent, and they are, and it's a business decision. I understand that, but unfortunately, it's leaving the most vulnerable in our communities more vulnerable than ever. And speaking as a landlord, I think the number one thing that we deal with when it comes to tenant behavior is allowing other people to live with them. And I'm sure that's a problem for a lot of landlords, and they're not tolerating it. So people don't have that capacity to go couch surfing with their friends who do have housing because their landlords are cracking down on it. And I'm not arguing that, but it's one of the things we're just seeing. A lot of people who have been hidden from us in the past because they were able to couch surf are no longer in that position and are literally living in cars and living on the street.
So I understand from the landlord perspective, this being a business decision, and obviously, the systems at play reward, the demand is high, the expense or price is going to be high. Like that's how it naturally goes when it's unchecked. But when we're talking about housing, this isn't like a PS5 or something that isn't necessary. This is a human right that we have a responsibility to provide to the citizens of Oshkosh. To me, that feels like we can or should be able to put some limits in place or some regulations in place saying, you're only allowed to charge X, amount of rent in whatever zip codes we have control of in this city, or just any, number of ideas we could brainstorm that are, reasonable for both the renters and the landlords. Because we also need to think not only about the folks living in their cars and the folks, sleeping down by the river or, in parks, but the houses and the families that, want to visit those locations that don't feel safe having those folks there, and it's a system, obviously, in this city pleasing everybody. But I don't see how we can do that if we don't put some regulations in place that, remind us and that essentially, again, this is a human right. It's kind of like what happens with healthcare when it's unchecked. It's just, you can charge $1,600 for an aspirin, at the hospital because the health insurance companies are all, it's an example or a similar system, in my opinion. Unchecked is only going to lead to more issues. And I feel we have a responsibility to put some regulations in place that are reasonable for all parties if we can find that.
I believe I've thought of that in the past, and I believe that Oshkosh, the city of Oshkosh, has a law against that. I believe that's the case of the city regulating any type of, rental standards, that there's a law against it, unfortunately, but there is, I believe.
I'd like more information about that. And just because it's a law doesn't mean it's good or that it should be a law.
Correct. Tim, do you know?
Not off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something in state statutes about it, because especially with the last omnibus landlord tenant bill, there was um, a lot of overarching changes to various elements of the rental industry, um, including inspections and things like that. But I'd have to double check. Yeah, I think more information on that question is probably useful. But just like off the top, my gut reaction is yes, there exists some law against setting caps, but I don't have more specifics beyond that.
And I wholeheartedly agree that we have tried, and there are some landlords who are still very sensitive to the social obligation that they feel to their community to help people. And there are some, but I'm just saying they're becoming more limited. A lot of people are getting out of the rental housing, especially the duplexes. They're selling them. Well, this last year just gave them that opportunity, and some people are they're just done with the business. It's not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, that's why I'm saying we're seeing far more property management companies playing into this whole concept. So I really do appreciate, would very much support and be part of a drive to get people to recognize the needs. But I think there's going to have to be some bigger ideas about what are we going to do, especially this winter. I can't remember where, but there was already a death on the street 2 nights ago, the first cold snap. And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to be that community, right? And I'm worried about day by day. I'm worried about the shelters in general in our communities. They're at capacity and there's people waiting. So yeah, I'm worried and very concerned because this population is increasing very quickly.
Linda, I think you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
Kelly, can we have legal look into it to see if there are state statutes or city laws that prohibit caps on rent? Can we do that?
Yep, I already wrote a note, so I will follow up with legal and I will let you know.
Great, thanks.
I just want to add in that whenever you start fixing prices, you get less of what you're fixing prices on, because obviously people are going to get out of the business, right? And people are just going to leave. So you're going to have less housing when you start fixing prices. And I also don't quite understand where all of a sudden real estate is always the one entity that prices have to be fixed at. And actually it's rental. It's not, you don't fix prices on home sales. You don't fix prices on food, healthy foods, right? You don't fix prices on hospital stays or anything else. But all of a sudden it's rental housing has to have a price fix to solve the problem. So I just think that that's a wrong-headed solution to it. So, but that's my.
It was a starting point for discussion, I think, for a discussion of an alternative to the status quo, because that's really what is needed. And of course, there are institutional obstacles against these types of changes in the state of Wisconsin, a lot of which happen at the state level. And even if like rent fixing is not the way to go, even if that's a bad idea, just repeating that doesn't address the problem either. So if we're acknowledging that this is a problem, and I really, really hope everyone is acknowledging that what we've heard here today is a problem, then more productive discussions need to happen. The fact that other things are also charged for that are human rights is not justification for why people should freeze this winter. And you say people get out of the business, like we were just told people are getting out of the business now, right? Like the problem is already here. What needs to happen is the prevention of loss of life and limiting the loss of dignity of these people further. So if rent capping is not, realistic to solve that issue, if such a plan were presented here, we can, have those discussions and hash it out as we have, or as we try to do. But I do think that research into this question is going to be absolutely essential. If not for this winter, then in the future especially.
And maybe another idea is incentivizing people who do versus penalizing people who don't. I don't know what that looks like, but what could we do that would make a property owner consider it? What would be of value to them to do what we would consider the right thing? I'm sure I've told this group before, but before I worked at AVOCAP, so we're talking many moons ago, I worked for a for-profit developer, and we did a project in Key West, Florida. There, developers were required to build 1 unit of affordable housing, and I mean affordable by people earning 30% or less of county median income, for every 4 units of luxury housing. Because if you've ever been to Key West, there's a lot of service down there, right? There's a lot of condos and it was a requirement, and there was money for people to help with that development of those projects, and that put the housing, affordable housing in place for people who were working in the hotels and the resorts, and that's what they needed. I don't know if there was a legal issue, but I am surprised because this issue is it's just not an Oshkosh thing. We look in the Dells, we look in Door County. I mean, there's a million places that this is true, but it's in our neighborhoods too, that this is such a novel and innovative idea of how to produce quality housing, but affordable.
Right, rent caps was not designed to be the end-all be-all idea, but the start of a brainstorm, like I think it was Tim was saying. So I'm curious if is your name Lou, the person calling in from WERA?
Yes, from AdvoCap, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let me see if I have that question or if I just lost it. I apologize. Based off of what you just said, like what other ideas are there? Can we provide incentives? What about WERA or AdvoCap or some programs, instead of paying $4 million to renters or landlords, or both. Forgive me for not knowing who gets what, but I know it goes to back rent and things like that. We provide $2 million or less in incentives to folks that are being quote unquote ethical with their pricing and going out of their way, and like you said, reward the people by providing that directly as perhaps like a credit to them, and then that turns a $900 or $1,200 apartment into an $800 or $900 apartment, which is much more feasible for folks to pay the full amount on, and the landlords through WERA get an extra $400 as a quote thank you for doing a nice right thing. We're not talking nice, we're talking the ethical thing, the thing that keeps people from freezing to death on the street. But like that, I think might help WERA/AdvoCap save money, and it would help save lives, and it would still give the landlords the fair market value in their unchecked system that doesn't limit rent, and everybody wins. I mean, right? Or what do y'all think?
WERA would just allow me to pay the entire rent and not have the home or the renter pay anything. That's from the Department of Treasury, their rules. I can't deviate very much from that, but I think it would be curious because to find out from a landlord, what would you be willing to do? And again, I've said this to many landlords. I don't want to rent all your units. I just want to rent a couple, percentage-wise of what you have. But right now, it's been this whole year has been an interesting housing market, first with the rent moratorium and then with the sale and price of properties. There's just so many things in play right now that I don't know how to encourage landlords to take a risk on people. And that's really, they're taking a risk no matter what, but they find a way to immediately eliminate people who have had evictions. And so eviction prevention, obviously, and what we're doing with the WERA program is ultimately there to help a lot of people stay in their housing. But we have a lot of people who are looking for affordable housing to get out of the high rent because they know they cannot sustain that long term. And they're just not finding it either. So there's just not the movement that there typically has been in the past with people being able, vacating units, moving up, and other people being able to move into affordable housing. It's a changing environment. So we are going to have to look at it very differently and with fresh eyes and new ideas. But the landlords are going to need to be part of our solution, and what are they willing to do? So I look forward to being part of that change, whatever we can do.
Just for the sake of the record, Lou, do you have any idea, or do you have any idea, we're talking people, but we're talking families, and I just like to bring children into the discussion because people that are impoverished are like mostly children. So can you attest to that are we talking families with children that are being deprived of housing?
We have approximately 280 people on our housing list through our homeless program. 160 of them are singles. And so it is a mixed group. And of course, you have a wonderful organization, Oshkosh Kids Foundation, who's been working, but they too have stopped motel vouchers. Motels are not a long-term solution. They're just not for families. And it's great for overnight and getting out of the cold, but it is not suitable for children and eating and all of the other things that go along with family life. So we continue to look for innovative ideas, and unfortunately, the need for a winter shelter, I'm afraid the demand is going to be much higher than the space that they're going to be able to provide.
Thank you.
So we'll continue to look, but yes, there are certainly families with children, and as I said, Oshkosh Kids is doing a great job of finding them and identifying them. Both they work with us and also with Forward Services, and so we're connecting people as best we can. But when we give them housing opportunities, they're not able to find housing. So it's that's that cycle that we're seeing so much of because they don't have the income, they've had an eviction, whatever it is. They're just having a very difficult time finding housing.
Are there any more questions or discussion on the AdvoCap data? All right, then. Thank you very much, Lou. And we will move on. We'll move on to item 6 of the agenda. We have Michael Rust here from the Winnebago County Conflict Resolution Center, who is here to inform us on some landlord resources and eviction expungement.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. So the Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center, it is a little bit confusing because we have Winnebago in our name and my office is in a county building, but we're actually not a county department. We're a private nonprofit organization. We provide mediation services. So we are a mediation center providing mediation services between landlords and tenants for a lot of their disputes. And frequently that ends up in finding a way to stop a court case before it goes to the eviction process. So we actually will work with landlords and tenants to try to find a resolution to whatever it is that is the conflict, whether it's the non-payment of rent or rules violations or other things, and try to develop a plan moving forward so that either the tenant will make the payments and stay, or the tenant will agree to move out by a date that everybody agrees to. And when we have that opportunity to work on that agreement and find an agreement that everybody is willing to say, yes, we can do that, then you don't have the evictions going on people's records and we don't start the cycle that Lou was just talking about. And so that's one of the ways that we've been trying to combat some of these issues. Obviously with the eviction moratoriums, things got all jumbled, but right now, honestly, when it comes to Winnebago County, we have not seen a flood of evictions. I think there's different reasons why that might be true, but I can tell you that in other counties, we are seeing many more evictions in other counties than we are currently seeing in Winnebago. So, the landlords have done a very good job of finding ways to work throughout the pandemic to find the right tenants. I know that Don Lord is frequently a part of this group, and Don and I have worked together on things in the past. And I know that the Apartment Owners Association has been a great resource for landlords in terms of trying to talk about what to do. And Don is a huge proponent of landlords needing to do their homework on tenants, and that before you ever rent to somebody, you need to do some kind of background research on that person in order to decide whether or not to rent to this person. One of Don's favorite statistics is that he's been a landlord for, I don't even know how long it is, but I'm going to say a number even though it's probably not true, roughly about 18 years. And he's never had to file an eviction, because he says he does his work on the front end, and then he also works with the tenants on the back end if they do get in a situation where they are unable to make those payments. And so as the Conflict Resolution Center, we are one of those resources that Don and other landlords have used to sit down between the landlord and the tenant and see if we can't find ways to resolve the concerns, either allowing that tenant to potentially stay in their home, or to find a mutually agreeable solution where the tenant will vacate the property by a certain date, and that will then allow them to move forward in their housing career without having an eviction on their record. Now, Lindsay had asked me to kind of talk a little bit about eviction expungement, and this is a very, I apologize. This is a very interesting topic. Expungement is a very specific legal term, which is primarily only an option for criminal cases. In the state of Wisconsin, expungement is really only about criminal cases, but the concept of trying to remove an eviction from your record once it's already happened is a little bit different. In Wisconsin, obviously, we have the Wisconsin Circuit Court Access Program, which people refer to as CCAP, which allows great access to everyone in an online portal to public records within the court system. So it becomes very easy to locate someone and locate their legal history, whether it be criminal or civil, and see if they have any type of past evictions. What we end up seeing is that when somebody does have an eviction on their record, that then kind of is that scarlet letter that goes with them for quite some time, because these cases are active on CCAP and searchable on CCAP for a very long time. It can be up to, it's a little unclear depending on the exact type of case and whether or not the judgment was ever satisfied and all of these other aspects, but this can be an 8, 10, 12, or 20-year time that these can be actually searchable. And so, I mean, it can last for a long time out there. Now, my office does mediate those eviction cases even when there is an eviction filed. So, there's a difference between filing for and receiving an eviction. And so once something is filed, it is immediately searchable on CCAP. So even if, the landlord files for an eviction, it is immediately searchable. And unfortunately, we do hear occasionally from tenants that they are trying to find a new place to live, but because this eviction is on their record already, even though it hasn't been granted, it's just on their record, that it's a pending case, that they are unable to secure additional, new housing to move into. They're trying to move out by the date that the landlord wants them, but they're unable to because of this pending case. Really the only way to officially expunge and I'm using air quotes there, but to expunge an eviction would be to seal the record, because it's a public record. And when you look at the laws regarding sealing of public records, sealing of court cases, evictions don't fall under one of the stated reasons why you can seal a court record. So there's really not a good way to seal an eviction or to expunge an eviction. So these end up staying on people's records for a very long time. Now, the Director of State Courts did make a change. That is the entity that oversees the CCAP program, the Director of State Courts. He did make a change a few years ago that said that any eviction case that is dismissed, whether that's because the tenant went to trial and won, or because there was a settlement, like a mediation arrangement that was created in the interim, if the eviction is dismissed, then that type of case will fall off, and I believe it's 2 years. It's only publicly accessible for 2 years, and then it's no longer viewable on CCAP. It's still a public record, but it's no longer viewable on CCAP. And so that has been a massive benefit to the tenant community, that if they are able to work something out with their landlord and get this dismissed before any judgment is entered, then yes, there is a massive potential benefit down the line, that this isn't going to be that scarlet letter for 8, 10, 12, 20 years, but it really will affect them only for the next 2. And so we end up seeing tenants who have been evicted in the past, and then maybe they come back and they're trying to work with their new landlord, but it's kind of like Lou said, they're not renting a property that is right for them. They're renting a 3 or 4 bedroom when really all they need is a 1 or 2. And so they end up spending more percentage of their disposable income than they should, based off of just needing to find a place to live. Alternatively, they start living in substandard housing. Is another, it's another place that people will tend to find, or like Lou said, the couch surfing, which is becoming less and less of an option. One of the things that we saw over the course of the pandemic is, with all of the eviction moratoriums, the eviction moratoriums were for non-payment of rent. But that meant that if the landlord found a different reason other than the non-payment of rent, they were allowed to move forward with an eviction. And having additional people staying in your property is a violation of the lease, and therefore that could move you towards, move forward in a legal eviction process. They may also have not been paying their rent, but they weren't moving forward based on that grounds. They were moving forward on a different legal ground, and therefore it was allowed to continue. And so we saw things like that taking place during the pandemic, and now, now with the eviction moratoriums lifted, we're kind of back to, doing business as usual. So I think we've kind of gotten through that component, but I think we've seen much more of the landlords working, as Lou said, the property managers coming in and becoming a larger component of the rental stock. We're seeing fewer of the mom and pop, single unit landlords than we were seeing in the past. And in some ways, from our perspective, it can be easier because we're working with the same people over and over again, and they are aware of what our services are, and that can be a benefit. But we would love to give that benefit to the mom and pop landlords as well. It's just they don't necessarily know that we exist. So I know I just kind of talked for a while. I'll stop and let you ask questions.
I have a question. So, When you talked about the eviction dropping off CCAP in 2 years, were you referring to that legal tune-up program? Are you aware of that legal tune-up program that's been in Madison for a while and now it's been extended through the state?
I'm unfamiliar
I'm
with
talking
what that refers to. This is actually a program of the Director of State Court. So this is actually within CCAP itself. That it's not something that is a program outside of the state. This is actually just the policy of the state that it is no longer viewable on CCAP after that 2
Okay.
years if the eviction's dismissed.
Have you ever heard of the legal tune-up program?
I'm unfamiliar with that program.
Maybe jot that down and look it up, because you can go in on a website. I'm not a legal beagle, so what I know to be true is if you go on, there's a way that people can get their eviction expunged off their record, but there's certain criteria that needs to be met first. So maybe you could go online and explore that and see what that is. I thought maybe that you would be able to speak to us about that program today, but I guess not. That's okay.
This isn't really 100% related here, but as you were talking, Michael, I was thinking about, we were talking about what could be done to get landlords to rent to people that have had an eviction. And one of the things, a program that maybe could work would be if they were the county or whoever, an organization like Lou's would provide essentially like it would almost be like a cosigner where they would guarantee, the rent. So they wouldn't have to lay out any funds, but if there was a problem and the tenant was then going to be evicted, that then these funds would kick in to cover, whatever losses the landlord had. So the landlord would take the risk on somebody that had an eviction on the record. Maybe this nonprofit agency would do some due diligence on them up front to make sure that they were a good risk from their standpoint, and then provide that sort of a guarantee. So that might be one way. And the only other thought that I had was, you were talking about Don doing his upfront due diligence on people, and I think that's great from a landlord standpoint, right? But I think that's also what you're talking about is the problem is that if you do your due diligence up front, you find out that somebody has, especially if you do a home visit or you are contacting previous landlords, you find out that this person wasn't paying on time, and it may not even be an eviction. In that case, it's as little as they don't make payments on time, so you're not renting to them. So yeah, that's I mean, I think it's good business practice, but it doesn't help with what we're talking about here today to solve that problem.
I completely agree, Todd. It is kind of that, this is from a business perspective, maybe what you should be doing, but is it really helping, is it giving that second opportunity to people? And if you have, in the rental market right now, I remember when I first rented in Wisconsin, I got a free TV because I signed a 1-year lease, right? Because it was a renter's market, and it's not a renter's market anymore. It's a landlord's market right now. And that's one of those where, the landscape has changed, and now the landlords get to be a little bit more choosy. And, if you have 12 applicants for every unit, and one of them has a bunch of evictions on their record, or even one eviction on their record, it's easy for that one to go to the bottom of the pile of 12. And then, your idea on the potential cosigner, I think that's a really neat idea. With one of the groups that Lindsay and I have been working with this eviction prevention task force that we've been involved in, is the UW Extension. And the UW Extension office actually does a Rent Smart program, which educates the tenants on how to be good tenants. And so that's another potential way if the landlords are interested in accepting that, one of the things we've kind of talked about is, can a tenant come and say, yes, I have an eviction, but I also did Rent Smart after that eviction. So, does that wipe it out kind of thing, in the landlord's eyes? Some landlords have been willing to consider that, others have not. So yeah,
I would think whatever, I would think whatever agency was going to be that cosigner would necessarily have that as part of their program, right? That the tenant had to go through that, because so much of this, a lot of these problems are also education of the tenants, right? Because even a lot of times we'll have our property managers will go in and they'll say, well, we're going to have to file an eviction. And we'll say, well, did you explain to them that this is on their record? They're going to have a hard time. Yes, we've explained it to, but I don't know, some people, it's like your kids, sometimes, you can tell them what the consequences are going to be, but it doesn't sink in until after it happens, right? And then it's like, oh, really? That what they told us was going to happen is really now happening. I can't get it. So some of it is just, financial education, was it financial literacy, just learning how to manage your money better, learning that, what you need to pay first are the things that are going to get you in trouble if you don't make those payments first. Your utility bills, your landlord bills, all of those kinds of things. That kind of education, I think, will go a long way to help solving this problem.
And Linda, to your question earlier, I did actually pull up that website. One of the things that does specifically say the Legal Tune-Up is a program that's put on by Legal Action, the UW Law School, and a couple of other partners. And they are helping people to remove evictions from CCAP if they were dismissed and they're older than 2 years. So it's things that should have already fallen off anyway, and these are just ones, these people are bringing it to the CCAP director's attention so that they can be removed more expeditiously.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Michael, I have a question for you. I'm wondering, and this might sound ridiculous, but I just need to know, would it be possible to completely remove background checks with CCAP existing, or no? Like, as essentially, one could say it's a form of housing discrimination.
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna opine on the last part of that, because I think there is a component to doing business with people that you should know who you're doing business with. And so I think there is a place for some type of background research on the person who you are, potentially giving a multi-$100,000 residence to, that they have complete access and control over for the next year. I mean, if I'm going to do that, I want to know who this person is. So doing some kind of background check on them of some kind, I would not feel comfortable doing without having some knowledge of who this person was. CCAP does, if you are clicking through and you see pending criminal cases, it does actually have a little splash page that says, recognize that this is still an ongoing action, and you may or may not be able to use this in employment background checks. And, so it has this little disclaimer page on criminal cases. Evictions aren't criminal, they're civil, so it doesn't have that same page for a pending case. So potentially there's something like that you could add. I think there's also an opportunity, ideally, to try to head these off before you even need to involve the court system. Encouraging those landlords and tenants to sit down and have conversations. It's not easy because, as a nonprofit organization, I don't have the authority to require somebody to attend, right? Unlike a judge who can say, be here or else, I have no or else. I can only ask people to attend, and if they are willing to, we're happy to assist. And when people do come to mediation, we resolve more than 80% of those disputes.
Thank you. I guess I'm thinking of, for example, someone who, let's say, committed a crime, they were in jail for a year, they came out and they have, a felony on their record, but they still need housing. And if we refuse them housing, or by, the landlords refuse housing because they saw that on the background check, and they also received applicants that weren't felons and they wanted to go the safer route, what are we now having? We're having a bunch of felons on the streets of Oshkosh that don't have housing. Like, it's not helping the community or the tenants. One might say, it's helping the landlords, but one could also say, don't they have insurance for that? I mean, like we're all saying, it's a business. They would obviously protect themselves on the front end, with property insurance and, making sure. And it's just something to think about, if you're getting applicants that, have records versus those who don't. The ones that don't have other options, like they can choose from pretty much any of the places that there are in town because folks will rent to them, no question. I'm talking about the folks who, have records that, they might stay on there like, oh, by the way, don't judge them for this for housing, but it's still out there and they could still choose to do that. Maybe that's another thing we could incentivize, landlords to, rent to folks who might have a record that looks, a little different than what they would hope that record would look like.
And for the sake of discussion, also, it's unfortunate that CCAP doesn't allow for mitigating circumstances, because not everybody gets evicted because they aren't educated. I'm assuming some people get evicted because there's 4 kids and there used to be a couple living in that house and somebody just left. The breadwinner just left. And now there's a financial problem. Now, those are mitigating circumstances sometimes, right? But there's no space for that on CCAP, why somebody's evicted. And I think that's unfortunate that there's no space saying why this person was evicted. Was it, a change in financial circumstances, or was it, criminal damage to property? That's the problem with the system, is that, this, again, for the sake of discussion, not everybody gets evicted because, they weren't educated, or, there was criminal action.
Yeah, Linda, you're exactly right. There are, having sat through literally hundreds of eviction trials, I've heard countless stories of, just exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
And the judges are extremely sympathetic, but the judges are limited in what they're allowed to do.
Right.
They have to apply the law, and the law says it doesn't matter if it was, that the breadwinner left and now you have 4 kids and no job. The law is the law. And, so it is something that is frequently talked through, but it isn't something that is included in that CCAP rule.
Right. And that's unfortunate. Or it's unfortunate that maybe landlords don't ask, what are the circumstances behind that eviction? Yeah. So it'd be nice if landlords would ask that question more.
And I think that is possible in a circumstance where there is excess housing stock, right? Where you're trying to get more people in, they may be willing to take a chance. But when you're looking at a situation where you have 12 applicants for every apartment, I don't need to ask that question. As a landlord, you may not have to ask that question because you have one applicant that doesn't have that concern on there.
Right. And it's almost like discrimination against the impoverished, actually. If you look at it in that deep way, it just keeps the poor.
So I have a question. You mentioned earlier that Winnebago County has like a relatively low number of evictions currently compared to other counties in the state or surrounding areas or something like that. And you mentioned like landlords doing their work to get, the right tenants. What other sort of, and what other sort of factors are you seeing that are preventing the spike in evictions now that we're seeing in other places?
One of the things that, not to throw my arm out of the socket, but we have been here trying to, work on these evictions before they became evictions. So we've been, throughout the pandemic, we were actually mediating over Zoom between landlords and tenants, trying to work out resolutions as things came up. And so, we were able to assist in, finding those right situations as things progressed. And so, Winnebago County was very progressive 30 years ago when they found a need and found the funds to support a program like us, which not every county has. We are one of only 6 settings in the entire state like this, and so we do have a great opportunity to provide this service. Not just there are others, but for instance, the one in Fond du Lac that we just recently took over, they have never really done things they only do things once there's been a filing. And so, any of those landlord tenant issues that were coming up, they had to just sit and wait before they could go forward with with all of the moratoriums and things. So, getting out there, getting this conversation started. The Eviction Prevention Project put out resources encouraging landlords and tenants to talk and how to have that conversation. There's an entire webpage on the Oshkosh Area United Way's website on these resources for landlords and for tenants. And some of them are out of date now because they still talk about those moratoriums, but more of them are still applicable, right? They still have talk to your landlord. Do you have a change in circumstance? Go and talk to them. And so, I think having those resources locally helped us to weather the storm, I guess, better than some other locations did.
And just sort of more of a general question, I guess. You said you have like an 80% success rate, which I think is pretty good. Do you find that? Can you kind of explain the process of how you like try to get trying to get the parties to the table?
Yeah, getting the parties to the table is often the most difficult part because you do have maybe the tenants not answering the phone because they assume that it's the landlord calling for the rent one more time. And so that tends to be that factor that really is the most concerning. We've been working with landlords who, we have a flyer on our website that people can use to, send to their tenant. So maybe they would have the information in a different method. You can cut and paste it. We have it in a format that you can cut and paste it into a text message or cut and paste it into an email, so you can send it to the tenant in different ways. That encourages them to call us so that we can set up an opportunity for them to meet. We then bring the parties together, have a conversation about what are they willing to do, right? What are they willing to do? Are they interested in moving out? Are they willing to move out? If so, when are they going to be out by? And let's create a plan for that. Are they interested in staying? Are the landlords willing to let them stay? Then let's create a plan for that and what that's going to look like to get caught up. One of the mediators in my office just 3 hours ago was downstairs mediating a case on an eviction. And this landlord and tenant, they agreed to a larger rental payment every 2 weeks as opposed to paying monthly, but they're now paying every 2 weeks, and that's going to help them get caught up over the next about 6 months. They're going to get caught up, and this person, the eviction is dismissed. This person does not have to find different housing, and it works out for both the landlord and the tenant. So, really, we encourage the landlords and tenants to call us and see if there's something that they can work out, because it truly is a benefit to both. The landlords are not having to do a changeover, they're not having to look for a new tenant, and they're also receiving other benefits within the agreement, and it kind of is case specific, but it's a huge benefit to the landlord and it's a huge benefit to the tenant.
I say we've got to get you on our flyer. I think that's fantastic. The Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center. I mean, what's the downside to that? There's no reason why you're not already on there. And thank you for doing what you do.
I love my job.
Any other, well, one more question. What is something we can do as a board to make your mission a bit more successful?
We're, as TJ just said, if you are willing to, spread the word about what we do, or, I mean, I've worked with John Zarati in the past on, if people come to his office with concerns on landlord tenant issues, his office funnels people towards us. So, I mean, if you are willing to and able to do similarly, and send people our way if they have rental issues, we're happy to assist them.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Rust? All right, thank you very much. That was very informative, and we hope we'll hear from each other soon.
Thank you very much.
We will then move on to item 7 on the agenda, the rental inspections update. Mr. Zarati.
Hey guys, sorry I got in a little bit late this afternoon. I was trying to do this from home, but then my link wouldn't work. So here I am. So the rental inspections, we had 11 complaint-based in the last 2 months, so up a little bit. Unfortunately, the number of inspections has not gone down. With those 11 inspections, we had 77 violations. So about our, typical average, maybe even went up 1. But all the same things that you heard me say before, lacking smoke detectors, CO detectors, bad electrical. Now, probably this last time was probably we had some lack of heat, doors and windows that maybe weren't closing right. So those types of things were a little bit more than we'd seen over the summer. As far as the program, still nothing on the program. We're not sending out notices for anyone for inspections at this time.
Any discussion on the inspections?
You're with Inspection Services, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, John. And I have noted here, I'll just get it all out because it's all the same thing. That flyer, Inspection Services, I noticed didn't have a phone number or contact information listed, as well as the Planning Services Division and the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. I can put that in the chat. But those 3 things, pretty much the flyer, when I reviewed it was, I hope it's not too late, but if we can add the contact information of Inspection Services and those other groups on there that just don't have contact info, I think that would be really helpful for.
If I may, on that point, yeah, the intent was to add contact info for those various entities.
Okay.
That's going to be the next step once we're sure we have all the entities we want and need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. And
so, of course, including inspection services, state level agencies, Winnebago Conflict Resolution, Apartment Association, etc. We can move on to item 8, social media update.
So I've got really nothing new to report on that. We've got the agenda, of course, for today. We posted that last week. There was a RentSmart class that was out. I want to say that was October or November, so we did post that. So that was shown out there. And then we also, after believe it was right after the last meeting that we did post the landlord tenant guide out there as well. Still, if you guys have any suggestions for us or looking for us to look up something that we might want to put on to the Facebook page, we can do that.
We could probably consider adding some like holiday safety tips or something like that for.
Make sure you water your Christmas tree.
Yeah. Cookies out for Santa.
Cookies out for the building inspector.
Sure. You don't want them to stay around though. You gotta
Right.
mention. All right. And then thank you, Mr. Zarate. That brings us to item 9, the Winnebago County eviction data update. Ms. Erickson.
Yes, let me share my screen. So this is the updated spreadsheet that I've been sharing each meeting. So I've updated as of today, actually. So for the November, these are the number of evictions that have been filed this is available through CCAP, like we were talking about earlier. So 63 evictions were filed in the month of November. So kind of right around the average that we've seen from 2016 to 2019. We typically see around 56 each month. And you can see October, we had about 61 evictions filed. So that puts us at a total so far for 2021 at 513. So you can see on the graph kind of where we've been for totals each year for the county. And then I'll move over to actual filings versus judgments. So again, this is going through CCAP. I try to update this, it takes some time for cases to actually go through the system and either be dismissed or come to an eviction judgment. So you see kind of lower numbers for October because those are still going through the system. But you can see we've been around kind of 50% of evictions that are filed are actually ending in an eviction judgment. So where the court would side with the landlord in that case. So that's what I have. Any questions?
I guess I have one question that might is actually for Mr. Rust again, but in a given month, how many meetings are you able to like hold between landlords and tenants, would you say? Or how often do you have those kind of meetings?
So we do, when we're doing the pre-trial eviction mediations, we actually show up at the trial where the court is, the judge is sitting on the bench and we're out in the hallway trying to mediate between the landlord and tenant before they go in. We will do, today there was four eviction trials that were scheduled. We were able to, mediate one of them. The other three declined to take part in the mediation process and want to go in front of the judge. Some weeks we'll do one, some weeks we'll do 4, 5, 6. There was one week where we did 8. So it really fluctuates based on just how busy the court system is.
Okay, I was just curious. Does anyone have questions or discussions for Lindsay about this data? All right, thank you, Lindsay. Seeing no other discussion on that, we can move on to item 10, housing study update.
Yeah, I can give an update on that. This is the housing study that I know you've heard about before that the city has been working on with a consultant. Right now, we actually are just finalizing comments from our steering committee, so we still have it in draft form, but we will be presenting it to boards and commissions in early 2022. So to obtain comments from the different boards and commissions. So it would be our February meeting, we'll definitely have this as an agenda item. And what we'll do is we'll talk about, some of the recommendations and the findings and probably next steps. So I think some of the discussions that we've had earlier today, as far as incentives to maybe build more low income housing or things like that. Those are things that I think we will be talking about in the study, and those will be recommendations. So we are trying to look at more programs to, encourage rental rehab and, to help with down payment assistance and, just across the board. We're going to be taking a look at all of our existing housing programs, just to see maybe how they would fit with some of the recommendations from the study also. So you're going to see some changes coming out of our office, but I think there'll be really good changes that will hopefully help the community members, and will be an opportunity for to attract more housing across the board, really. We know we need low income housing, but at the same time, we also need high income housing. And you might think that, that doesn't make sense, but, if people that can afford maybe higher income housing, people can move, and it's kind of a domino effect sometimes. So, we're just looking for ways to encourage, housing for all. And then the second part of that too is, I know we have talked about the day-by-day shelter a little bit, and cots, and then the tiny homes, Lou had mentioned, and those are 3 different initiatives that the city has been engaged in and trying to work just to have, additional opportunities for that kind of continuum of care and housing in our community too. So that will also be part of the housing study too. So stay tuned for our February meeting, and we'll have myself and Mark Lyons, our planning manager, that are going to talk a little bit more about it. Does anybody have any questions right now?
One,
Linda. Oh, what's that, Linda?
is there any programs talked about with regard to helping people get into their own homes, like assistance, like no interest down payments for homes, anything like that in the city?
Yes, we have
that?
Yeah, we have multiple programs that we do have actually existing right now, that it could be down payment assistance. And if you live there for a certain amount of years, it's a forgivable loan then, and you don't have to pay it back. So, and some of that is dependent on your income level. But we are looking at potentially maybe increasing those, just seeing the housing market and how the houses are more expensive. We have to somewhat kind of go with what the market conditions are. So we're looking to be flexible in that way, so people are utilizing the program, and it is helping them, achieve, their goals as far as housing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion on the housing study? I'm pretty excited, super nerdy civil servant kind of way for this report. I mean, it's been over a year now, and a lot of promises and of like a lot of actionable information. So I'm ready to sink my teeth in for sure. So tell your friends to come to our February meeting.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that then brings us to item 11, the public information campaign. So I sent out lost my train of thought. After our last meeting, I sent out sort of the final or the most up-to-date versions of the brochure and poster. Again, the brochure is not like formatted yet, but all the information is there. As I mentioned, there's some details we still have to add, such as contact information for the following services that I have noted down. So we'll include contact for Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, for inspection services, for AdvoCap, for Winnebago conflict resolution, for legal action of Wisconsin, for student legal services, for UWO student legal services, for the UW extension, for the apartment association. Are there any other resources we should make sure to add to that back page, which Kelly is showing us now?
I might have missed it, but did you mention the Rent Smart at UW?
Yep, I said UW Extension.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
It might seem so simple, but just 211, like, would that be helpful to include in case folks aren't familiar?
Sure. And on the our old pink brochures, there's a few other things we could include: Consumer Protection Agency, Fair Housing Wisconsin, and the Oshkosh Student Association, if we're so inclined. So the next steps would then be to get this to the people that can make it look nice and ready for publication. So I know we discussed Mr. Zarate, I believe, reaching out to those relevant people. Have any update on that?
Yeah,
Yep, go
Yeah,
ahead.
which ones were you looking for us? I didn't have that in my notes, I guess.
Like I think reaching out to like media services and
Oh, for helping to promote. Yeah, we'd have no problem getting that lined up once you have everything ready. Yeah, that's
or
fine.
are you talking about more of a graphic designer, to somebody to like put it together, you said, to make it look nice?
that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really have a person like that on staff. But
Okay.
yeah, maybe we could talk to media services, or even Anne, who helps them with some of the neighborhood marketing too. So we can see. Otherwise, worst case scenario, we do have, a budget that we could potentially look if we do need to hire somebody to help with it. Also, that could be another option.
Does anyone have friends or associates that might be willing to take on a little, work to benefit the community out of the goodness of their hearts? If you think of anybody, I guess let me know. I'm happy to make contact with those people. So, staying on the brochure, then I will update it, adding that contact information. If anyone else then has ideas in like the next couple of weeks for people who can help with layout, or your own layout ideas or anything like that, please get those to me. I would like to have like a real draft version by our next meeting for sure. Is there any discussion on the poster?
Regarding the brochure and the poster, I'd like to see just a little logo on both of them. Just a small logo that maybe three circles: city, tenant, landlord, because I think that's really important that's on, could be in some little corner here, and a logo, there's a space for a logo on the brochure already. But, something designed where it's landlord, tenant, and city all working together.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to see anyways.
We can work on that too. All right, so
So I'm okay with just turning this over now to Zaretti, and if you want to add in your additional contact information, and then just let the city take a first stab at it and get it back out to us, and then we can decide if we have to go to some sort of graphic designer or something. But I think
I think what Kelly was saying is there is currently no one on staff to do the stabbing, right?
Yeah, we don't do too many brochures or anything. And we did have somebody on staff that did dabble in it a little bit, but he has gone now. So we haven't done any since, but we can certainly take a look at it and see if we maybe have any existing ones that we could just use as a template and, insert your information in, if you don't mind, if it maybe look a little bit like some of our older ones. We can, change the colors or anything. And as far as the logo goes, That one might be a little bit more difficult because I know we do have certain rules as far as how we can use our city logos. So I'd have to see about that one.
I think Linda was suggesting we create a unique logo.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably something that would probably have to be a graphic designer would have to tackle that.
Okay. All right. So
And I think I'm having I really like the yellow in the poster, and it'd be nice if there was yellow on the brochure so they would sort of go hand in hand.
we can print the brochures in like yellow. How about? All right. So in terms of getting it ready, then there's sort of like 3 things I see that need to be done to the brochure then, which I can work on in the coming weeks. Just a little bit of formatting of the front cover, adding some bolding or changes in font or something like that and stuff like that. In addition to the logo, I know there's free like logo design services available online, so I can take a look at that. And then just adding the resources to the back page. Anything else?
So I've been hesitant to share this because, full transparency, I'm married to a graphic designer who's fantastic and local, but I also, as you know, their spouse, don't want to say they'll do it, you know, because I want to stay married. But they work at Lincoln Labs, and that business is a local Oshkosh business right next to the Gibson Social Club. They've done the branding for the Gibson, they've done the branding for a lot of local businesses, and they might be someone y'all could partner with, not as like a free project on the side, but as, you know, a professional, you know, paid endeavor. They've also done the branding for Hope Fridge, and a bunch of other, like I said, local businesses and like lawyers' offices, and you know, pamphlet building is a specialty of my husband, but I don't know if that's a specialty of the business on its own. Like, what I'm saying is they're definitely worth inquiring, Tim. So Lincoln Labs is definitely someone to consider for help with, you know, the basically, if you give them the finished copy, and I stress they want it finished, and no like edits after the fact, they'll turn it into something beyond your wildest dreams. But again, full transparency, you know, I am the spouse of somebody there, so I don't want y'all to think this is any sort of, we don't need the work, honestly. I even asked my husband if he would do it, you know, on the side, and he doesn't have time. You know, he's spread too thin, but as a, you know, 9 to 5, he might be able to fit it in if it's through his business. So it's, if that helps us, it's just some information if y'all are struggling to find a designer.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep that in mind.
Sure.
Anything else on this campaign? All right. I think it's a good time, like, for this campaign also, especially given, you know, things we're hearing from Winnebago conflict resolution about the need for like education and encouraging communication between landlords and tenants and things like that. And we'll probably, you know, gain a little more the campaign itself might gain more teeth once the fair housings or the affordable housing study comes out, and again, more just sort of actionable details. But we can move to item 12, which is other business. Is there any other business?
Kelly, and everybody, we may or may not be aware about the day-by-day warming shelter. The Planning Commission approved the proposal yesterday. So my question for you, Kelly, is I know the Oshkosh Redevelopment Authority has, I believe they've postponed kind of voting on the budget for that, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a meeting coming up, I think it's January 19th, which is before February. And so I'm asking if you could specifically, or your people, get in contact with them and share this data before that meeting so that they have the results of this housing study before they make a decision on if they're going to fund the new big day-by-day warming shelter or not.
Sure, I can give a little bit background information. And by the way, I was forwarded your email where you were asking about the date of the RDA meeting. So I am the RDA Executive Director. So what TJ was talking about was for a while, the RDA has been talking with the day-by-day shelter and the Oshkosh Housing Authority about purchasing. The city would use part of our HUD CDBG allocation to purchase parcels that are currently owned by the Oshkosh Housing Authority. And just so everybody knows, the Housing Authority is separate from the city of Oshkosh. It's a different entity. And we've been talking about it for a long time. And so day by day is finally, come to the point where they wanted to build their own facility. Right now where they are, it's not meeting their needs. And, they have some sponsors that they're looking that they think that they can construct a new facility. Kind of following, protocol or, the courtesy review we usually give RDA when we purchase property. We did bring it in forward to them on, I believe it was November 17th. And they decided to table it until the next meeting. But just as an update, city staff did meet afterwards and did find that there's other ways that we can acquire the property without RDA approval. So I think we're probably going to go down that path in early January, actually. That will probably be in front of the Plan Commission on January 4th and then Council potentially on January 11th. And we're not going to purchase the property until day by day has all of their funding in place. We want to make sure that they're going to go forward, that they're going to, they have the funding to construct what they want to construct with what we actually approved. And I know that they're, working with the city and also the county to try to secure some of the ARPA funding that was allocated. So there's still some balls in the air, but we at least wanted to get the approval. So then when we're ready to acquire it, we have it. And if something would happen where it would fall through and they wouldn't move forward, then we would, we wouldn't be stuck with a piece of property. So that's where we're at with that. And so it's definitely something that I can keep everybody in the loop with come our next meeting in February.
Where was that location again, Kelly?
Sure, it's on the corner of Broad and CP. So it's near the river. It's in our central city. And, we had worked with the day-by-day shelter looking at multiple sites in the central city. And it was really important that they were in the central city because that's where a lot of the services are that, those citizens do utilize. So the day-by-day shelter board wanted to remain in the central city for their guests just to make sure that they're close to all those different resources that will be helpful towards them.
And who owns the site now?
The Oshkosh Housing Authority.
What is in that building now? Is it literally just empty?
It's actually vacant land right now.
And are there any things that we can do as members of this board or that citizens can do to help make sure that this proceeds?
Well, like I had mentioned, tentatively we're planning that it would be potentially on the January 4th Plan Commission and January 11th council meeting, for consideration to purchase the property. We already have the funding allocation from CDBG, so it's not coming out of city funds. And we would just purchase the property and then sell it to day by day for $1. Because one of the national objectives of CDBG is to, support low to moderate income people, citizens in our community. So, just any support, that you can offer to, the Plan Commission members or the council members to let them know that, you do support this initiative and you think that they should vote for it also.
How do we let those planning commission members know?
On our city, on the websites with all our boards and commissions, it does have information about contact information, or you can certainly send an email to me or our planning manager. Mark Lyons, and then we can share that with the group also. Or you can always come to the meetings also.
I was unable to find information on how or where to go for those meetings. I apologize for all the questions, but I just
No,
need to
that's
know.
okay. Right now, the meetings are actually virtual for Plan Commission. So they are going to be talking in early January to see if they want to go back to in-person or stay virtual. So on all of the, much like our agendas, we have that link where it would have that meeting information. And that's something that is on the city website. And we have, I think there's a link like meeting notices where it has all the agendas for meetings coming up in the city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other new business or other business before we summarize and wrap up?
I just had one other item. Just kind of looking at our agenda. I know a lot of times, you know, we have agenda items for Lou to talk about, you know, her programs, and then Lindsay to talk about eviction data. They send us like a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet before the meeting, and we provide that in your packets, and then they still talk about it. I just want to make sure that that's still kind of the process and how you want to have the information, but then still talk about it at the meeting too. I just want to make sure folks were okay with kind of how we're doing it right now.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
At least I have no better idea. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know if folks thought it was, you know, it was not, I won't say overkill, but it was too much, you know, we didn't need to have, you know, the information coming and then to have the discussion too. So either or, I'm fine with whatever. I was just looking at the agenda and wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable with it.
I think a little bit of time in advance for perusal and to think up questions and that kind of stuff is really helpful.
Okay, great. We'll keep it as is then.
All right. So next time, I imagine our agenda will look very similar as it did for this meeting. We won't hear from Winnebago conflict resolution again, but we will have a discussion about the housing study. And I do think maybe some kind of discussion or brainstorming session about the not capping rent, but also what the problems that, you know, the problems that policy would, that type of policy would seek to address, and then brainstorm like more viable alternatives potentially. So I know you're all looking for like a research assignment to do over the next couple of months. I would say that's a pretty good one. Anything else?
Just one thing maybe for Mr. Zarate. Since this board started, I guess I thought about this morning. I guess I'd like to find out if there's been any difference with since this board started, with the education that we've put out so far, with the farmers markets, our brochures, between then and now, if there's been any change in reporting of complaints by the public. Do you understand my question?
I did, Linda. So just right offhand, without running numbers, I would say that I've seen just the steady, constant, 6 to 10 inspections in 2 months' time when people are requesting the complaint base. So I don't know that I've seen an uptick in them, and I don't know that I've really seen a decrease in them. So it's kind of just been this steady thing all along.
Okay, so okay, I guess I should have asked you that question when you were talking earlier then. Yeah, so the past 4 or 5 years, 4.5 years, it's been steady. It's just been the same pretty much.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else? If there's no other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Ernst,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Hobbs,
Aye.
Dvaltis,
You're muted, Linda.
Aye.
Hutchinson.
Aye.
Excellent.
Then we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you for your time and insights, everyone. I hope you have a safe and pleasant holiday season. Make sure you're getting your vaccinations, and hail Santa. We'll see you in the new year.
Bye, everybody.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
Bye.